Are moving on in chapter 4, lesson 4, rivalry in North America. And you will see that the beginning of these notes have the red asterisk on them. And the red asterisk means that you are not going to find this information in the textbook, at least not in this place that we're looking at. So we're going to start with rivalry between the French and the British, which is here in the text, but we are not going to start reading right away. So we're first of all going to define colony. Now, we've been talking about colonies since we started school, and I have given you the definition of colony before, but we haven't specifically written it down in our notes. So we are going to do that now. So a colony is defined as a settlement, which is a place that's under control of another country. And usually it's the native country. So when we're talking about the colonies, the 13 colonies, they are under control of Great Britain or England. And most of the people in the 13 colonies also came from Great Britain or England, which I shouldn't say or England. They're the same place. Great Britain and England are the same place. I have mentioned that before, that we can use either name for that location. Now, that's not to say that we don't have people from other countries within the colonies, because we have talked about people from other countries as well, but primarily we have English people in the 13 colonies. So now number 2, rivalry. We have this term rivalry up here in the title and right here in the title. So what does rivalry mean? We need to kind of define that to understand what's happening here. So rivalry means that it's a competition. Now, in this particular rivalry, what they are competing over is land. So sometimes people say that a rival is like your enemy, and it doesn't necessarily have to be. It could just be a friendly competition. Now, in the case of here, we're going to be talking about a war. So then typically we're saying that your rival is your enemy, but a rival does not have to be an enemy. It's just someone that you're competing with. And so you're both going for the same end prize. And in this case, they are going to want land, and land in North America is what they're focusing on. So number 3, what is an empire? You maybe have heard this term before. You actually should have learned what an empire is in 7th grade, but this is also a term that's used in other circumstances as well. But an empire is a country that controls land in different parts of the world. So in this unit that we're talking about, England is an empire because they control the 13 colonies, which is in North America, and obviously England is in Europe. Okay, so they are an empire. They are not the only empire, but they are a major empire. And land equals power. That's why they want to control land, because that means that they have more power. It also typically brings them more wealth, which leads to power as well. But I use this, we'll call it an equation, that land equals power. And I'm actually going to ask you to write that in numerous places in the notes. It's something that I really want to ingrain in your mind, that land equals power. I'll pause here a moment to make sure that you have all that information in your notes. So our next piece that we're going to talk about here, I've actually already put in your notes for you, because in Google Docs, you can't manipulate certain things. You can't necessarily draw on things. So that's why when I ask you to insert text boxes or put arrows or things like that, I give it in a Google slide. But I didn't think that that would be a great idea for this one. So I just decided that I was going to put in the information for you for our next piece, which happens to be the map that we're focusing on. So we are going to look at the British land claims and the French land claims in North America, because that's who is going to have this rivalry, this competition over the land. So we need to know what land there is and what land they have control over and what land they are competing over. So the first thing that you should recognize is that we're looking at the 13 colonies, right? And the 13 colonies is controlled by England, or also called Great Britain. So I already put this on your map for you. And actually, I'm going to uncover this little key here as well as we're going through. And so I always like to start with labeling the things that we know. So I also have these 3 little marks here that are for the Appalachian Mountains. Typically, the triangles are going to be symbols of mountains on maps. So we have our Appalachian Mountains. We also know some bodies of water that we practiced and then took a test on for the 13 colonies map test. So we have the Atlantic Ocean, we have the Gulf of Mexico, we have this river right here that hopefully you know is the Mississippi River. And then we have this river right here that is the Ohio River. And again, hopefully you know that one. And this one is coming into the Mississippi River, and then they dump into the Gulf of Mexico. Up here, we've talked a little bit about this area, and that is the Great Lakes. We live near one of the Great Lakes, right? Lake Michigan. So hopefully you are familiar with the Great Lakes. And then we are also going to look at land claims. So first of all, the 13 colonies, right? We already have that one on here, that England has land claims on the 13 colonies. And they are also going to have claims on parts of Canada. So where is Canada? It is to the north of the United States, right? Although it's not the United States yet here where we're in our notes. But England and Great Britain have control over parts of Canada. That's as specific as we're going to get on that for now. So they have controlled parts of Canada. And then our French land claims are going to be Quebec and parts of Canada. Now I have this star up here, and stars typically denote capitals. So that was the capital of Canada then. And so they also have control of other parts of Canada as well, but we're really just going to focus on Quebec because it's going to be kind of hard to distinguish between between Great Britain's control and French control. So Quebec is under control of the French, and also the capital of, they call New France, okay? And then also they have control over land that is west of the Appalachian Mountains, right? So that's west of the Appalachian Mountains and east of the Mississippi River. So in between the river and the mountains, from the Great Lakes up in the north, all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. So there's not a name for this area of land. So it has to be described in the way that it's written there, that it's west of the Appalachian Mountains, it's east of the Mississippi River, it's from the Great Lakes in the north to the Gulf of Mexico in the south. Now, they're also disputing over the Ohio River Valley, which is this land around the Ohio River, okay? And this is where France has claims, but Great Britain wants to have control over that. And we're going to talk about why everybody wants control over this Ohio River Valley as we move forward. I'm going to pause there a moment in case you didn't have a chance to write that information in. Oops, I forgot to uncover Spain. And Spain's already on your map as well. But Spain has control over Florida. We talked about that earlier on, that remember Georgia was supposed to be a barrier to keep Spain out of the rest of the 13 colonies. So Spain, we're going to see a little bit of Spain in here as well in this unit. But they right now are pretty much just in this area of what is Florida. So our next question, and this is one that I've been actually saying to you over the last few lessons that we've done, is what is another name for England? And that is Great Britain. And they made this change in 1707. So Again, it still doesn't matter. It goes by either name, Great Britain or England, and I don't care which one you use. I usually use Great Britain because then I can abbreviate it as GB when I put it in notes. But either one is right. It doesn't matter. Technically, it wasn't called Great Britain until 1707, but at any time, if you refer to Great Britain, I know you're talking about England. If you say England, I know you're talking about Great Britain. So then number 7, here we go. So this one is one that we're going to find information in the notes. So the question is, what were the 2 leading powers in Europe? And so we're going to read under rivalry and French, rivalry between the French and the British. In the 1700s, Britain and France were the leading European powers. They competed for wealth and empire in different parts of the world. In North America, their rivalry was very strong. So I think actually in your notes, I wrote, yes, the 2 leading powers in Europe and North America. I don't have the and North America added onto here, but it's the same answer. So our 2 leading powers should have been easy to figure out. It's who we've been talking about since we started this section, and that is Great Britain and France. So now again, here I did the GB for Great Britain. You can type in Great Britain if you want to. But if you know that GB means Great Britain, then you can just leave it at that, okay? So what were they competing for? So we know that they were competing over land, but we need to be more specific. So I'm going to continue reading. This rivalry turned especially bitter in the mid-1700s. The British began to show interest in the Ohio River Valley. The vast land beyond the Appalachian Mountains was rich in resources. The British believed they had a right to this land. The French also viewed the valley as theirs. The French enjoyed a thriving fur trade with the Native Americans of the region. They did not want to share this business with British settlers. So, first of all, they are looking for wealth and empire in different parts of the world. We're going to take our answer from a couple different pieces here. Wealth and empire in different parts of the world. Specifically, they are talking about the Ohio River Valley. So remember, land equals power. We're going to put that in here again. They want power. And this having control over land in another part of the world will make them an empire. It will bring them wealth. It will bring them power. And so also things that they're competing over are the land, fur, trade with Native Americans, and the Ohio Valley specifically. And the reason why they want this Ohio Valley is because it's a link to the Mississippi River that they can use then for trade. And I'm actually going to flip back to the map in just a moment to point something out to you about that. Okay, so MS is Mississippi and then river. So if you don't know what MS means, then it might be a good idea for you to put that in your notes as Mississippi. Okay, so the Mississippi River. So I want to real quick flip back here to the map to show you this again. That we have France in this area, right? Here's the Ohio River, here's the Mississippi River, that our mountains are English colonies. So for some of these people for trade, it is going to be easier for them to travel down the Ohio River to the Mississippi River to the Gulf of Mexico to go down and around Florida, and then they can go over to Europe, they can go over to Africa, they can go down to the West Indies, and it's a easier way for them to travel rather than coming and going over the mountains, going all the way over here, and then traveling across the Atlantic Ocean. So they want to have control of the Ohio River so they can get to the Mississippi River. And they don't like to share stuff. So they want to have control over this Ohio River for that reason. There's lots of nice wooded areas here. There's lots of vegetation. There's lots of fish. There's lots of animals for trapping and trading. And so these are things that they all want to have control over. And when I say they all, I mean France and England, okay? France and Great Britain. So then, let me uncover these again. The differences in the land claims. Why does the English want it? Why does the French want it? Okay, so I just sort of gave a little bit of an explanation of that. But the English want the land as permanent settlements. They want to actually settle and live in North America. And the French want temporary settlements. They want to use the resources of the land. They don't want to actually build and establish societies in North America. They simply want to use the resources. And then number 10, how did this affect the colonists in North America? Well, it caused conflict between the British and the French colonists. Now remember that we have people primarily in the colonies that are from Great Britain, but we also have people from other countries in Europe that have settled there as well. Their friends, their neighbors. This is going to cause conflict because also remember that when people came to North America, they stayed loyal to their home country, to their king. And so they still see themselves as citizens of Great Britain and citizens of France. And so as that, they sort of have to root for the home team, if you will, because they want to have the land for their own home country. I'm gonna leave that there for a moment. So we are going to pause here. We're not through with this section. You should notice there on your notes that lesson 4 is actually fairly long of a lesson. So I'm going to be breaking it up into more pieces. So we're going to pause there for today. Make sure that this is saved in your Google Drive where you know where it is, because you are going to need to come back to it tomorrow so that we can continue to add information to it. Okay.